Welcome back, everybody, to Rasputin Gaming Presents. Today, I'm giving you my review after platinum of Ghost of Tsushima. Sucker Punch's Ghost of Tsushima is an absolutely gorgeous adventure through one of history's most strikingly beautiful landscapes. And that beauty is heightened by one of the best blade to blade combat systems the open world genre has seen. There are some stumbles when it comes to stealth, the enemy AI, and a few other minor frustrations, some pathing issues. But for just about every moment where Ghost of Tsushima falters, there are plenty more where it ascends. So in this story, you get to take control of Jin Sakai, who starts off as a samurai before a disastrous battle against the invaders. Quickly teaches him that perhaps the honorable but restrictive ways of the samurai code might not be enough to deal with his new and existential threat. So the Ghost of Tsushima revolves around this inner conflict as Jin's formative teachings push up against his need to save his homeland at any cost. And though it takes a little while to get going, it's a compelling struggle. Jin is a charismatic protagonist, and the antagonist, Kodun Khan, has charisma in bunches. He's one of the most memorable game villains of recent memory. He's extremely cunning, always one step ahead, and his presence as the big baddie is a large part of why Jin's 43-hour quest for vengeance works so well. Yes, it took me 43 hours to complete the game and get the platinum trophy. So let me address gameplay. Ghost of Tsushima's combat is like a sorceress's brew, and the result is magical. Like all great combat systems, it's simple to understand on the surface. There are light attacks to quickly deal damage and beat out slower strikes. There are heavy attacks that deal more damage and can break through enemy guards. There's a block button to guard against certain attacks, and a dodge button to avoid the attacks that can't be blocked. That all probably sounds familiar, but the glue that holds this combat system together and allows it to remain interesting the whole way through is the addition of different stances you can shift between at the push of a button. As Jin's legend grows, he unlocks new sword stances that each come with their own attacks and, more importantly, their own strength against a particular type of weapon. So you start with the stone stance, which is ideal for dealing with swordsmen. Later on, you'll learn the water stance, which uses slower but more powerful strikes that can break through the defenses of shield-wielding enemies. There are 4 stances total, and once you have accessed them all, combat will challenge you not only to identify the greatest threat at any moment, but swap to the stance that is best suited to deal with them, all the while balancing the very real need to play defensively. When it's at its best, combat in Ghost of Tsushima is fast, chaotic, tactical, and is true to the fantasy of being a lone, hyper-skilled but outnumbered samurai. So the combat is fluid, satisfying, and despite the camera being somewhat awkward from time to time, it never feels stale. There is no lock-on, which keeps the combat moving quickly and keeps you on your toes as attacks come from all directions. Enemies aren't level based, but the difficulty comes in opting for the right stance to suit your current foe. As you fight, you'll be changing on the fly, which can be problematic, but you'll need to be keeping an eye for the optimal moment to parry or dodge. There is a hidden challenge to knowing when to switch stances, as differently armed Mongols are attacking you at once. And that's part of the real challenge of this combat system. If you can master it, it works really well. If you are average at it, it will be problematic and you will get hit a little more often than you expect to. The best part of the gameplay, though, is that there's no traditional level-based stat kind of progression. There's not really an RPG part of this game. When you get stronger in Ghost of Tsushima, because your techniques got better, you got more skills. And this can be very, very satisfying. I found it satisfying because you can be any place on the map and you don't have to worry about wandering into unknown areas where you are out leveled by anybody. I found it fantastic because it means that you'll never run into an area of Ghost of Tsushima where all of a sudden you're getting one hit killed by archers who you previously brush off, or having to spend a week chopping away at the sword equivalent of a bullet sponge just because they're arbitrarily several levels higher than you. It really adds to the realism of the game and really keeps the flow moving well and keeps you engaged throughout. Impressively, Ghost of Tsushima's difficulty always managed to be appropriate no matter what point of the campaign I was at. Enemies do get tougher, and you do need to improve your gear by upgrading your sword, your armor, the charms to meet the difficulty curve. But the stat improvement from gears always felt secondary to the skills that I accumulated, and the challenge always felt fair that way. Even when I bumped the difficulty up to hard mode, which makes enemies more aggressive, it never took away from the lethality of my sword. So it really is about the skill that you have, but not to the level of like Bloodborne and the other Dark Souls kinds of games. You don't have to be that good of a player. Your skill set is still pretty basic, although quite varied. So it's a matter of understanding which tool set to use. So on top of all this, there are the various tools and gadgets that you can use over the course of your adventure that really helps equalize the odds. And as Jin gets more and more comfortable with bending the samurai code using tools outside of his normal repertoire, his combat abilities also expand dramatically. I found using the kunai to quickly interrupt or eliminate weakened enemies really gave me the opportunity to move combat along quickly. But maybe you want to throw sticky bombs or use smoke grenades. Either way, there's lots of variety of ways to approach combat in Ghost of Tsushima. And me, I'm a big stealth person. So in Ghost of Tsushima, it's a good thing that the blade to blade combat is good because the ninja inspired stealth does not hold up its end very well. It works on a basic level, don't get me wrong. In all the ways that you would expect it to, you can crouch walk through fields of tall grass and sneak around enemies. You can jump up on the roofs and be above them so that you can assassinate your foes. You can even buy upgrades that let you take out multiple enemies at once if they are clumped together. The problem is what happens when stealth is broken. Enemies just don't know how to handle it. If you climb back up on a roof, they almost never follow you up, and they don't usually revert to any kind of ranged weapon to try and take you down. And if you break line of sight really quick by rushing around and hiding behind a yurt or a wall of logs, after a short time, the enemies will lose interest in where you are. And the makings of a response to broken stealth are there in that the enemies will break out a horn and start blowing that there's some kind of threat around. But it doesn't pull all the enemies to come looking for you. It just warns them, and then they're kind of in an aware state for a while. That's kind of unfortunate. It's like the AI just throws up its hands and shrugs. And unfortunately, that means you are almost never in any kind of serious danger when you opt for stealth as your main method of clearing out enemies. So that's really how you can quickly move through the game. You can start as you come into a Mongol encampment, you can start off with a standoff, break line of sight, go into stealth mode, and then pick off the remaining guys. And if you're later in the game, you can use the ghost stance after you've killed enough guys to render it operable and then get a free 3-person kill. So it's just that part of the game is not as clean and as effective as it could be. It works, and if it's stealth is your thing, you'll probably enjoy it because you can stay in stealth almost indefinitely. Fortunately, though, Ghost of Tsushima offers a way to make going loud right out of the gate just as advantage as picking off a handful of enemies unnoticed, and it does so in the best possible way. At the beginning of most combat encounters, you can trigger a standoff, which allows you to target one of your enemies in a classic showdown, where you must wait for them to make a move to attack and then strike with one of your own to take them down in one hit. If you nail the timing, that's one fewer for you to deal with, and then as you build up your skills, that can go up to 5 consecutive enemies, so it can go pretty well. But that's only the beginning, and you can make these standoffs a major part of your combat strategy, as I mentioned before, by putting points into standoff technique and wearing armor that allows you to chain multiple standoff streaks together. By late in the game, I was taking out, as I mentioned, 5 enemies at once for every time I did a standoff. Of course, there is a risk involved with standoffs. They're absolutely devastating if you lose. Your health is drained almost to nothing, and you're put in a position where you're surrounded by all of the still very much alive enemies in the area. The risk gets greater later on as enemies start throwing in feints and try to make you swing early. It is an all-around fantastic mechanic that not only fits with the samurai theme, but also takes the fun of a typically disadvantaged tactic of just waltzing through the front gate and makes it potentially just as rewarding as silently going through an enemy encampment and stealthily clearing out a bunch of guards. By the late game, combining a maxed out standoff with ghost armor allows you to, if successful, quickly kill 8 enemies without much trouble, thereby reducing large number of enemies to small manageable pairs. But it's not without its flaws. Combat is sometimes let down by a couple of major factors. When fighting on uneven terrain like staggered rock formations and inclines, the tightly interlocked cause and effect of parries and blows starts to unravel, resulting in holes where animations occur before the effects are not passed on. The camera can also be an issue. It should be noted again that Ghost of Tsushima does not have a lock-on feature as part of its tool suite. Presumably this is because enemies are constantly attacking from all directions and you should always have the ability to react quickly. But continually having to worry about the camera in order to keep an eye on every enemy within range attack is also a problem because you're trying to manage changing stances, dodging range projectiles, and keeping your health up. And lastly, the keystone combat maneuver, the standoff, can be problematic at times depending on the terrain. There are times when tall grass obscures your vision of the enemies, or they're behind rocks or tents if you fire off your standoff in a camp, and you can't always tell who's coming or when they're moving, especially the first one. The first enemy you're going to fight is the key to the timing of the entire series. And sometimes they are half their body is obscured, so it's tough to know when they're coming at you or when they're fainting. A lot of the traditional guides tell you watch their feet, and many times you cannot watch their feet. So I found watching the belt buckle, their midsection, kind of like if you were ever a defensive football player, you were told to watch the ball carrier's midriff because wherever that part of their body goes is the direction they're going. So kind of the same with the enemies, with the standoffs, if you find them in the grass or partially obscured. Pay attention to their middle. Narrative. And what an immediately beautiful world it is, full of bold, saturated colors, grandiose weather effects, and an overabundance of windswept leaves, petals, butterflies, and other small particles that make every location feel alive. The island of Tsushima is a painter's palette. Vibrant red and yellow forests sit upon inviting green hills by day, blinding sunsets soak everything in deep orange. At night, bright white moonlight glistens off dark blue lakes and waterfalls to illuminate everything around you. I enjoyed all the environments of Ghost of Tsushima. At times, it almost feels as if art direction is trying a little bit too hard to draw attention to itself. And Ghost of Tsushima certainly make a concerted effort to try and absorb you into its radiant world even further with this deliberate lack of navigational information. There's no option for on-screen minimap or compass to see which way you're going, and I found that to actually enhance the game, and the objective markers are barely there. Instead, features an in-world device called the Guiding Wind. So just a swipe on your dual shock touchpad and you can summon a strong wind. Really ties into the game really well than having markers or a path light up for you that points you in the right direction. And it just acts as more of an obvious nudge in the right direction, and it really doesn't break immersion at all. It's a great system. Without anything to draw your eyes from the character in the world, the Guiding Wind pushes you to pay more attention to your surroundings, to let you more quickly internalize key landmarks that help you get your bearings more easily later on, or just to feast your eyes. Other in-world devices like plumes of smoke, flying songbirds, foxes, torii gates, and more help guide you towards your new activities. Ghost of Tsushima's story hits hard in the game's third and final act, and I mean hard. It ends in a spectacular fashion. It really tugs on the emotional heartstrings, probably more so than even The Last of Us, which everybody knows how that one ends. The game hits a lot of fantastic cinematic highs, and those ultimately lift it above the trappings of its familiar open world quest design and all the innate weaknesses that come with it. Ghost of Tsushima is at its best when you're riding your horse and taking in the beautiful world on your own terms, armed with a sword, allowing the environmental cues and your own curiosity to guide you. Audio. What isn't ever a bummer in this game is the music. The dynamic score seamlessly shifts from quiet and ambient flutes during stealthy movements to thunderous drums once blades start clashing. Tense encounters are made even more palpable thanks to increasingly speedy strums of guitars. Overall, it doesn't matter what you're doing, the music always fits and serves to enhance whatever the emotion of the gameplay and cinematics are trying to evoke. The game even allows you to add in your own flavor of music by giving you multiple musical options as you find singing crickets. So you get 4 different kinds of tunes that you can play at your convenience. So replayability. Replayability is something this game lacks. Once you've been through the story once, there is not enough variety of gameplay or story to have you run it again. There are no difficulty related trophies either, thereby not creating the unnecessary forced requirement of multiple playthroughs. Your trophy run will require you do everything the game has to offer, from collecting every kind of item in the collectible suite to completing all of the side quests, completing all of the mythic quests, and clearing the entire map of all enemies. Last category, fun. I found this game to be quite fun, and having run through it twice, earning the platinum both times, I do have to admit the last 15% of the game can get tedious as you're trying to grab all of the remaining collectibles, trophy events, and side quests. It seems like they have Mongols parked on every one of your collectibles and points of interest that you need to find, which I found, as I mentioned, to be tedious and extending the game unnecessarily. Ghost of Tsushima does finish with a flourish, though, as I mentioned earlier. The last 5% of the game, you begin your final assault on the Mongols until the credits run showcases everything that is great about the game. The swordplay, the narrative, the camaraderie between the protagonist and his NPC friends, and the environment in all its splendor. When the credits finally run, you will feel like you've gotten your money's worth. Now on to the part of the review you all are looking forward to, and that's the ratings. So starting with the gameplay, I gave it an 8. Great gameplay. There are some warts, but it's overall it's a great game. It brought some new dimension to gaming, especially with the standoff feature. The narrative is a 9. It's an amazing narrative. It does lack in a couple small areas, not totally inconsequential, but enough to keep it from getting a 10. Graphics in this game are good. It's a little bit cardboard cutouty in spots, but otherwise it's good. There's not a whole lot of repeat of character models or assets. Audio is 10, masterpiece for this game. The audio is just amazing. It keeps the game moving along. The flow is great. The types and variety really match the game. It's really, really well done. For replayability, I gave it a 1. Basically, there is no replayability to this game. Once you've gotten through it, you are through it. If you find that you need more of a challenge in the game than the difficulty you're playing on, you can obviously switch to the difficulty at any other time throughout the game. There is no reason really to play it again, unless for some reason you miss something on your trophy runs. So fun, I gave it 8. It was great fun, don't get me wrong. While playing this game, even though it took me 43 hours this time and it got a little tedious at the end, it still it was a whole lot of fun playing this game. I really enjoyed it, even though it's a second time through and I knew how everything was going to go. I was able to cut the time it took me roughly by a third by knowing how the game is put together and getting it through it a lot more efficiently. So overall, I give it an 8. It's a great game, and I think everybody knows that by this time. And I was playing on the director's cut version with all the DLC and things like that on it. Overall, yes, an 8. And now the last category, unique to me, is the ability to platinum this game. I gave this an 8. The ability to platinum this game is not real difficult. There are a couple things from making this as easy as a 10, in that there's some hidden items such as the last haiku, which you don't know exists in the very end of the game and is not on the map anywhere, and that you will find it after basically the story ends or right at the ending of the story. And that's not clear. So things like that that are a little bit hidden from you can be problematic. There's the trophy for max standoff kills, can be slightly challenging but not too difficult. Otherwise, it's just the length of the game that knocks it down a point for me. And that even if you're experienced with the game, it's still a 40 plus hour game. And if you have not been through it before, it can be a 60-hour plus game. And I have a hard time saying games that take you 60 hours, which is nearly 3 consecutive days of playing. I can't rate it a 10 when it takes that long to platinum. A lot of people are going to lose interest trying to get the platinum unless you're a hardcore trophy hunter like I am, and I know a number of you are out there. But I want this review to be fair to people that say, hey, maybe I can platinum this game, and they're not that dedicated of a trophy hunter. So the ability to get it is not that difficult. You can play the game on easy difficulty and get there. A lot of the game-wide collection trophies are not that difficult. So it's for me, it's an 8 out of 10. So there you go. I want to thank you all for sticking around for this. Don't forget to friend and follow us on Twitch. If you're on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel. I will be continuing to bring you reviews of all the games I have platinum in the last 12 months or so, 14 months, probably since the beginning of 2022. I can't go back all the way. I'm at 96 platinum trophies, I believe now. So going back and reviewing all the ones that I have gotten the platinum trophy on is not really feasible at this point. Plus, there's a number of games. I think I have 3 or 4 games where I missed one trophy, so I haven't gone back to play through the entire game because those are usually game-wide trophies. You guys take care and be safe out there, and we will catch you next time.